everyone, my name is Jessica Scott Santo, also known as Jessica Scott Hair on Instagram, and I am one of Moroccanoil's global color ambassadors. Today I'm going to be teaching you the placement for a full fake out foilayage, so let's get started. This technique will help minimize the amount of foils used, cut time in half, and really look like she got a full foilayage service done, but still keep it nice and high contrast and lived in at the same time. So we are going to really focus on the front of her hairline. This is where your client will mostly see the impact. So we're gonna focus around the face, we're gonna focus underneath, and then we're gonna get into the pivoting section on the top, so that way it could still be low maintenance and lived in. So when I have a client or a guest come into my chair, the first thing I really want to focus on is around her hairline. Does she want a really bold front-faming pieces, or does she want something that's very seamless so that it really grows out nicely? So what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to do a little bit of a mix. So I don't want it too bold where it looks like she's gonna have a line of demarcation in. So what I'm gonna be doing is an L-shaped section. This is also really good too, is if you have a client or guest in your chair and has a lot of receding hairline. She does not, but most of the time this section right in here is a little bit more sparse. So you wanna make sure that if your client pulls their hair back, all that light is going to reflect as she puts her hair back and still capture all that sun-kissed pieces around her face without leaving a dark hole around her hairline. So what I like to do is really focus on getting that front hairline and make it really pop for her, but again, still make it really seamless. So she parts more or less in the middle. If you have a client that only parts to one side, I always wanna make sure that I go off the actual part, because when I work my way up to the top of the head, I'm gonna be pivoting my foils, and that's what is gonna allow me not to have to do 1,000 foils and basically have more time in the chair, which you don't want. I always say less is more, and I'm sure your client will thank you later for it. Okay, so my L-shaped section. So this is going to be the start of the whole first section here. Okay, so we're gonna be starting around the face. And anytime I place a foil around the face, I like to go in with a weave section. It's gonna be a little bit more seamless for when they pull their hair back in a ponytail and look a little bit more softer. Okay, so I am going to do a really fine weave. And I'm going in with my Moroccanoil Blonde Voyage Lightener, and I'm only using a 10 volume. Everyone usually has finer hair around the face, it's more porous, so you don't need to go in with a higher developer right away. Okay, so I'm gonna go take that lightener right up to the hairline and ultra fine sections. Edit that part, I'm sorry. And then I'm using my consistency for my lightener a little bit thicker, because usually around the hairline, it's a little bit more finer. So this just helps almost act like a glue when you put it onto the hairline. I also like to lock my foils. So I fold my foil over my comb, which allow me to see that flap underneath. And I really like to kind of push that down, meet up with that foil on the other side, and then lock that in place. This is really good if you are one to put color in between foils, so that way those foils are not moving anywhere for you. Okay, so I'm gonna do about 3 back-to-back foils, and the only hair that I'm gonna be leaving out is the kick out from each section. Okay, so another weave. Again, that's the only hair that I'm leaving out, but I'm gonna leave that for later because I'm gonna tip those pieces out to make it a little bit more bold around the face. Remember, anytime you're doing a weave, you're gonna get more depth going through. So I wanna keep these pieces close together so that way it has a little bit more impact. Anytime you want to take a slice, you're going to get more coverage. So I'm going to be alternating between weaves and slices on her today because she is almost all one solid color and she's never colored her hair before. So we're going to give her a nice, good impact on her color today, utilizing that slice work as well. And making sure that you get full amount of coverage, especially if you want to get to the lightest color possible. If you still see a lot of hair underneath your lightener, you are not fully saturating, and saturation is key to a foil application when you're lifting the hair. Okay, so that's 2. And I'm gonna do one more close together weave. And then I'm actually going to start to back home a little bit of my sectioning. And what is really good, especially if you are working with someone who has really fine hair, really healthy hair, if you use the Moroccanoil dry texture spray and you just spray a little bit onto that base of her hair, it's gonna really help kind of make those baby hairs, or if you're doing a really heavy back home, kind of stick in place. She doesn't have a lot because she has really healthy hair, but that's a really good tip to use if you want to hold your back comb in place. Okay. Push those little baby hairs up. I kind of call it a little, like a fake out air touch, because I'm only flicking those pieces away versus really do a heavy back comb like I will to the front pieces around her face when I tip those out later on. And this technique I actually do about 95% of the salon. Obviously, everything is a little bit more customizable to how much blonde they want, how much dimension that they want. If they want a really bold pop on the ends, but this is a very similar placement that I, again, do almost all the time at the salon. So what you see normally on my page this is exactly what I'm doing here. Okay, so now I'm gonna start pivoting on the sides. And again, that's still this L shape that I did in the beginning. So now I'm gonna take this foil and I'm gonna start to pivot. So that means I'm gonna still take the edge of my foil in the front, still close with that foil on the bottom, but now I'm just gonna pivot the back end of it. And that's gonna allow me to keep the depth going internally. And again, I'm gonna tip out all these sections here, so it's still gonna allow me internal depth, but still create the brightness that I want around the face. Okay, so I like to take a slice first usually, because that way my weaves, my foils will be even. I'm gonna go a little bit heavier on the weave here. So yeah, she really honestly has really nothing to flick up, but that's kind of the technique that I use. I like to hold the hair, so I don't start it from down below. That would be a really heavy back comb, and that's gonna give a lot of that gradient depth in there. So I really like to kind of hold my section up a little higher and kind of almost flick away any of those baby pieces in the hair. And then what you can even do too is you can also now customize it a little bit more. And I like to do a lot of slant work. Go up a little bit higher on one side and just keep a little bit of depth kind of going back away from the face. So that way it will keep brightness around the front and start adding a little bit more depth internally. Now anytime too that you are swiping up the hair to make that blend, I see a lot of the time people take really ultra thick sections when they do that. I don't like to do that, just because if you are swiping up and you have a really thick section, you're only tipping out the surface or the top part of that hair. And sometimes that's gonna leave a really orange line of demarcation or a warmer band of demarcation that a lot of blondes do not want in the hair. And then it's gonna be a little bit harder to correct that during your toning application. So that's why I like to take finer sections if I'm ever blending up with my brush.